Hi, everyone. This is the Leadership at Heart podcast, and this is Heather Younger, your host. Employee experience is powered by emotions. Managers and or leaders within organizations get to choose which emotions they unleash from within the people they lead. Leaders, meaning supervisors or above in an organization, drive much of the positive or negative emotions by their actions or inactions, their words, or what they fail to say. When a manager chooses their words and their actions carefully, they exhibit great emotional intelligence. These managers are often thought of as leaders who care, or as I like to call them, leaders with heart. This special brand of leader drives engagement and loyalty simply by being themselves. Are these leaders perfect? Absolutely not. It is in their awareness and sharing of some of their imperfections that we realize their true brilliance. In this podcast, I ask you to see yourself in the stories my guests tell about times when they were not the best versions of themselves, but how they used their hearts to guide them to a deeper connection with their team and heightened leadership prowess. Before we move on and you hear the show today, I want to make a special request of you. I would like this podcast to remain successful and to increase the amount of listeners and people who are downloading it. And in order to do that, I need to get more reviews. So, for anybody who is a listener, and if you love the show, please go and do a 5-star rating and write a review anywhere you listen. And then screenshot that. If you screenshot that and you email me at heather@customerfanatics.com, heather@customerfanatics.com, then in the next show, I will give a kudos to you for doing so, because I actually am very appreciative of anybody who does write those reviews. And if you already have done so, thank you very much. Thank you for joining this show and enjoy this one. Hi, everybody. This is Heather with the Leadership at the Heart podcast, and I am beyond excited to have a super special guest today on Howard Behar. I actually met him. He probably doesn't remember me, but about a year ago, both of us were speaking at a users conference called TinyCon, and he was sitting with someone on the stage and having conversations about his experience at Starbucks, leading Starbucks as the president, and I just could not believe. I was just sitting there like, this is like a sage. We have to record every bit of this and put it everywhere. And so anyway, he's posting here and there on LinkedIn, and I've been really inspired by what he's been putting out there. And I said, you know what? I'm the host. I'm going to have Howard on. So thank you for coming on the show, Howard.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I've been looking forward to it.
So where are you right now anyway in your leadership journey?
Well, I think I am where I've always been. Learning and trying to figure out what it's all about. And I learn from people like you who I get an opportunity to talk with. I learn from students that I'm mentoring. And, you know, what I am is sure about one thing, is that servant leadership is my model. And I have grown into it I'm 75, and I started learning about servant leadership 50 years ago. And when I read the first booklet by Robert Greenleaf, The Servant as Leader, The Leader as Servant, excuse me. And so I'm still on that journey, figuring out what all that means and how does it work and how to get other people to look at it and to either adopt it or to teach me more about it or whatever. So, but, you know, I'm at 75, you start to get, even though you continue to learn, you start to get not set in your ways, but you start to come to the conclusion of what really matters to you and what you believe really works. And that's kind of where I'm at. I'm a true believer in servant leadership.
Oh, I love it. And I love all the components or just how you describe things and, with your experience. So obviously the most prominent one being with Starbucks and being the president there and just some of the cultural changes and things that you helped put in place. And, you know, it takes a strong person, which I know you to be just by that by watching you and the interaction I had to be able to try to put certain cultural changes in place. And so, you know, kudos to you for that. Now, I would be curious to know, when you talk about servant leadership, can you provide the listeners just some examples of what that might look like?
Well, you know, my kind of mini definition of servant leadership is that leaders are there to serve their people in the journey of accomplishing the organization's goals. The people aren't there to serve the leader. it's the opposite of what we might think. And particularly if you listen to all the politics of today, you'd think it was people are there to serve their leader, but it's not. It's the leader is there to serve their people. And by doing that, then we allow our people, help our people grow. We help our people achieve the things that they want in their lives. And so doing, they help us achieve what we want in our lives. So that's kind of the simple definition. But, servant leadership, is really about growing people. It's about helping our people to become all that they can be. And by so doing, when they leave your organization, they leave as much bigger people than when they joined your organization, and they go on to change other organizations. And so it's for me, it's the be all end all. I have at my age, I've worked for a number of organizations. I've reported to a number of different people in my life, and I will tell you without a doubt, it works much better than any other system, much better than autocratic systems and anything else. Doesn't mean there isn't a time for a leader to be autocratic, and particularly in times of danger when there's a fire or something like that, or whatever we would term as a fire. But 95% of the time, we don't need that. And so it works, because I've been in organizations that have been autocratically led and blew up, and a few of them did. And they blew up because people didn't trust. They didn't trust their leader. They didn't feel like they were growing as human beings. They didn't feel like their leadership cared about them. And I've been on the other side, where an organization shouldn't have succeeded based on what it was trying to do. I mean, you think about Starbucks trying to sell we were trying to sell a $4 cup of coffee. Why should it have even worked? At that time, people were selling cups of coffee for 25 cents, but it worked because the people believed. First of all, they believed in themselves, and they believed that leadership cared about them, first and foremost, more than anything else. And that's kind of what made it work.
That's amazing. It's funny because I can't hear this stuff enough. I can't teach this stuff enough or speak this stuff enough. And we hear it and we see it a lot out there in the world on LinkedIn. We hear it. And sometimes I often wonder, I hope not, because I wouldn't keep doing the work I do, but I wonder sometimes if it's kind of like we were speaking in the world just to people who already feel the same way. Are we reaching other people? Are we touching people who need to hear these messages? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's changing dramatically, and it's changing at a fairly fast clip. It doesn't mean that it will, the biggest issue is when things get tough, right? That's when we fall back to our natural ways. And many people, their natural ways are autocratic. But if you look at what just happened, Jamie Dimon, who is the head of, one of the big banks, not Wells Fargo. Chase, yeah. And he and the group of executives have come out and said, we have to change how business does business. We have to see us as serving more than just a shareholder. And that was a big thing for these people to say. It was 145 executives from the world's largest companies, the U.S. largest companies, signed on to this. And that's a big thing. And having that happen, that really tells you that it is really beginning to change. I was part of John Mackey's group, Conscious Capitalism, that he started in the early days. And it was, that was really an offshoot of servant leadership. And John was the CEO of Whole Foods, and he was a servant leadership person. And now, conscious capitalism has really taken hold, and it's part of the same genre, the same things. And you see it everywhere. And people are recognizing this. At the end of the day, it works. The military. You wouldn't think the military is really has a servant leadership model, but they do. They've been ahead of other organizations in our country because they had to, because of the type of people that they were recruiting and what their young people reacted to today versus what it used to be. Now, and today it's not go climb that mountain, for somebody that's in the military. It's, hey, we want to climb that mountain. You figure out how to do it, right? And if you need some help, let us know. But here's why we're doing it, climbing the mountain. It's just a different way of looking at life.
It really is. And it's interesting that you bring up the fact that all those companies signed on to that. I don't know if we want to call it a promise, a declaration, a charter, whatever that is, right? It's going to be interesting to see. And I know you know this, but it's going to be interesting to see how they actually put it into practice. Like, all right, so you can say it all day, and this is what happens, right? You say it all day. What actual steps are you taking? What resources are you going to put behind it? Don't just put money to it.
No.
Is this actually culturally, is it changing inside your organization from you and all the ranks up top, from the board that's above you, they all bought into this thing? Because if you sign it as one person, but your board is giving you that pressure to and act in a counter way, be more autocratic, whatever you're talking about, it's going to be baseless, right? It's not going to have any impact.
And it isn't about money. It's not about resources. I mean, part of it might be, but not really. The truth of the matter is, I mean, it's really about how you act, how you behave, what you do, what you say, and how what you say turns into action. That's what it's really about. And it's the continuity of it all, right through the ranks of the organization. It can't be just the CEO doing it, and it can't be just one director or officer somewhere down. It has to be the whole organization going at it. Now, it has to start someplace. And it takes time. You make lots of mistakes. Starbucks made lots of mistakes along the way. We didn't, I considered Starbucks a servant-led organization, but that didn't mean that we were always servant-led. There were times where we made mistakes, and we had to get back on board again and figure out where we were headed, and our people held us accountable, and that's what has to happen. That's when you know that it's really working. When the people of the organization have the ability to hold their leadership accountable to servant leadership. That's when you know, when they have the ability to speak up and speak out and hold their leaders accountable, and their leaders listen and take action.
That's like that. You just define the entire thing. I tell people, I really think that, so the work I do, I started off in my business with customer fanatics. I started off with like customer experience, employee experience. And then all of a sudden I got this like wake up call where I was like, wait a second. This is actually about leadership, and it's the leaders who get to push that button that make the bus go in a direction or not. Yeah. It's the leaders get to push the button to make sure resources are allotted to a certain initiative or whatever that is, right? And so I need to change this focus. I need to change what I'm talking about. But the other thing is, the crux of it all is, if people feel like their voices are powerful, and that the leaders are then responding, because you have to have the and. My voice is powerful because the leaders respond. Right. They listen, they respond, they listen, they act. And I think that is the most critical element of all of this, is that if they are doing those things and responding appropriately, not in every single case that you're responding, and you help drive the mission and the vision and the strategy forward based upon those voices, then everybody's going to feel like they're involved. It's not going to be just Howard's initiative. Oh, it's not. You're right. It's going to be everybody's exactly. It's going to be an us and a we and an our, and that's when we're successful. That's when Jamie Dimon's people can make things happen, right?
That's right. And you look at you look at organizations around the world, and you look at businesses, and you can tell the difference. The ones that are led by servant style leaders, and the ones that are not. I mean, it just shows up, day to day. It shows up in the day to day.
So, can you recall for those who are listening, because it's obvious you're pretty darn awesome. I've already said you're, the sage. I'm watching you on stage, and I'm thinking, I have to have you on here. You're breaking all the rules, and I'm got you on here. But I needed to have you because I feel like people need to hear this. They need to hear from someone who just has had a longer journey and knows this stuff. So, but have you ever been at a point where you just weren't the best version of you? You weren't necessarily the best servant leader. And what did you do to come out of that? How did you become more enlightened? What was your aha moment that made you think that way?
Well, I mean, that's a huge question because it's been, as I said, I started the journey when I was in my early 20s, and I had the idea. I had no idea what it meant. I wasn't a conscious competent. I was an unconscious competent. Treating people with respect and dignity. I did that. But I had no language for it. I had no model for it. I didn't know what it meant. And I was seeing all around me this autocratic style, and so there was this push and pull of, okay, what's good, what isn't. And as I grew, I got better at it, and I got more convinced it was the way to do. And as I studied more about myself, which was really, really the biggest issue, in order to be a really great servant leader, you really have to know you. You have to know who you are, what you stand for, what your values are, how those values turn into action. Because it's not what you say, it's what you do. And if you're going to say something, then it has to be followed up with the do. And it's your values turning into action. So I haven't always done it the right way. I've made lots of mistakes. I'm competitive. I like to win the game. I move at a fast clip. I expect people to be able to keep up with it or beat me to the end line, finish line. And so there have been times in my life when I haven't lived out the model of servant leadership. Everybody does. When something was going wrong, when I might come in and scream, at the team, why didn't we get this done? You said we were going to get it done. You didn't, I've done that. And what I had were strong antenna. When I did that, I couldn't live with myself. I'd go home that night and I'd look at myself in the mirror and I'd say, how did you do today? And I said, I did shitty today. When I'd go in the next day and I apologize and I own it. Now, what I had was lots of rocks on the positive scale, so people would forgive me, as long as I wasn't doing it all the time. And so, but, everybody makes those kind of mistakes. You're not 100% of anything all the time. And it's just like being in a relationship, being married. I've been married now for over 40 years, and, I've screwed lots of things up. I'll give you a great example. So servant leadership, is not about work. It's about life. And so if you're a servant leader, you're a servant leader at home as well as everywhere you live, everywhere you are, you're a servant leader. So my wife is a very smart woman. She's a oncology social worker, and she is a wonderful writer. I always was pushing her to write because she's very good. And one night we were having dinner, and she got so mad at me. She said, I want to live my life the way I want to live it, not the way you want me to live it. And we got in a blowout argument over it. I thought after we were married by that time, about 30 some years, and we got an argument that I thought this might be the end. I mean, it was that bad.
Wow.
And so we went home that night, and, we went to bed, and I slept on the couch and she was sleeping in the bed. And I woke up about 2:00 in the morning. And, one of my mission statement for myself goes like this: every day I want to nurture and inspire the human spirit, beginning with myself first and then for others. Now, I say self first because what I've learned after living this long, that if I'm not okay with Howard, then I can't help anybody else. So anyway, so I went to bed that night, and I woke up about 2:00 in the morning, and I was feeling guilty and I was feeling terrible. And I said, God, Howard, what's your mission statement? To nurture and inspire the human spirit. Were you nurturing and inspiring the human spirit when you keep pushing Lynn to be you instead of Lynn being her? And so I woke her up and I apologized to her. I said, I'm sorry, honey, you're right. I've been thinking about me, not about you. I've been thinking about serving myself because, I was so sure this is what you should do. And so, that's life. And, we work through it and all of that. And so I've had to remind myself all the time, I am a goal-driven person. I have written out personal plans for the last almost 50 years, and I still do them. Even at my age, it's pretty optimistic to have a 5-year plan. But Lynn is not that, because she's an oncology social worker. She's living with people that are dying of cancer and their families. They live moment to moment because that's all they can see. And so she comes from a different place. And so, you learn those lessons, whether at home or at work with your children, that's part of doing it. One of my favorite quotes is a 2-word quote. And I didn't see this quote till I was almost 50 years old. And it's these 2 words: compassionate emptiness. Compassionate emptiness. Men have a flaw. Not all men, but many men do, and that's we want to solve other people's problems, but that's not should be our role in life. Our role in life is to listen and to have other people tell us how they're feeling and listen to what they want to do, not try to solve the problems for them. And that compassionate emptiness, be full of compassion but empty of solutions.
Oh, I love
That's
that.
what servant leadership is about.
Well, what I love about what the idea of it's about life. It's not just, being a servant leader at work, but at home is the congruency, the authenticity of it, because, there's a lot of that. Even at home, I have to do that. I have 4 children and I have to do a lot of self-reflection on,
Yeah.
I'm in employee engagement. How well am I engaging and listening to my people? I'm certified in emotional and social intelligence. How emotionally intelligent or self-aware am I today? Did I, overspeak on top of people instead of really stopping, putting them first, those types of things, right? I think the difference maybe between you and I would be that we do that self-reflection because it's a kind of an examine at the end of the day. Like, was I congruent with who I say I am? If I say I'm this person, did I act that way? And I think that's what's missing often is that examine of figuring out, am I walking this talk that I talk about in front of the shareholders, in front of the employees, in front of the leadership team, whatever that is, right? What is it? Is it incongruent or congruent with what I say I am?
Exactly. That's it. And you have to ask yourself that question. I have this little game I've played with myself for a long time. As I look in the mirror before I go to bed and say, Howard, how did you do today? It's against my mission statement and my values and my goals in life. And that's what I do. And, that helps you keep on track. And I have this board of directors that sit on my shoulders that are constantly talking to me. We all have them. We may not recognize them. But I've had to learn to manage that board of directors because some of them are not very productive. Some of them, I have this one that's always telling me how great I am, and I have to talk back to that one and say, I hear you, but I'm not that great because I'm always afraid. When you start thinking too much of yourself, then that's a time for trouble. And then I have the one that's always saying, Howard, get with it, buddy. You're not that great. And I have to manage that one too. It's this constant conversation on my shoulders about what I do and how I do it, and having those board members talk to me and learning to manage them.
And it's interesting because I think too, even coming from where you've come from at working for the organization that you did or the organizations that you have and being in the position that you were, I bet you too, now that you're, I wouldn't even say retired because now you've written 2 books and you speak and you do a lot of things, but retired from having, managing teams and having to work that corporate structure. I would think that you might have some of those interesting struggles because you're used to being in that place where you're driving so much and now you're driving you and your process.
It was a huge change for me. I went through depression for a couple of years when I left Starbucks because Starbucks just consumed you and you consumed it. And it was just so much a part of my life. I mean, I started when it was tiny and how it influenced me and how I influenced it. And all of a sudden it's not there. And I kept asking myself, what's my life about now? What's my life about? Who am I? And, I used to always preach to people, you are not Starbucks and Starbucks is not you. And yet I fell into the trap myself. I was all consumed with it. And so I went through this time period of trying to figure out who I was. And I really got seriously depressed. And so finally one day I was on the sofa reading a book and, I was thinking to myself, God, my life is almost worth living. It's got that serious. And then these words came into my head. Howard, your life's work is still your life's work. Your life's work is still your life's work. And my life's work was about helping others, serving others.
That's beautiful.
And that began, and all of a sudden I started to repeat those things to myself. Your life's work is your life's work. And I started to attach and so my life's work, it blossomed again because it was true. It didn't make any difference whether I was at Starbucks or I was just by myself or I'm mentoring 6 second-year MBA students at the University of Washington, whether I was on boards, it didn't make any difference. It still was that work. And so I settled into that and I do that. And that's what I do. And
I love it.
Keeps me energized.
Well, I love that. And we're going to make sure for those listening, I'll put the links. You'll just go check the show notes now and you'll see Howard's, the links to his 2 books that he's written. And there'll be some other things there too, because I want to make sure we promote that because boy, I mean, this is one of those things you want to keep on the bedside and read that often. There's a lot of good stuff in there related to leadership and life and the things that he's talking about now. So Howard, for those that are listening, for maybe leaders who are either in a transition, those who are taking on a new role, those who are deciding whether they want to be leaders, I'd be curious to know what might be a couple pearls of wisdom you'd leave them with to get them through kind of that rest of that day or into that decision.
of what they want to be, you mean? In terms
like kind of the leader they want to be, whether if they're transitioning in and out and they're just maybe at a crossroads or, and just need that little extra motivation or inspiration, I guess. What would be maybe 2 pearls of wisdom you'd leave them with?
Number 1, read. Read about role models that you identify with, and then use the tools and the things that those people do in your journey. Don't be afraid to copy. Because after you copy long enough, it becomes yours, and you'll make it yours. You'll use different words, but make it yours. I wasn't born into servant leadership. I learned it, and I learned from others what worked, what didn't work, what I liked, what I didn't like, and what worked for other people. I mean, I think you can't read enough good books on leadership, and my favorite stuff has always been Drucker because I think he and Robert Greenleaf were close friends, and they talked a lot about leadership. And Drucker didn't say it as servant leadership, but that's what he talked about, basically, was servant leadership, that model. So read, and then copy, emulate. Don't be afraid to do that. You don't have to make this stuff up. You'll make up your own along the way as you get more confident. And the goal is to become a conscious competent at servant leadership. And what I mean by that is that you're conscious about what you're doing and you can teach it. You can teach it. You can explain it and you can teach it. And that should be the goal so that others grow and learn from you. So that's one. The other, if you're in an organization where there isn't servant leadership being practiced, don't be afraid to do it inside your organization. Let's say that you're a leader that has a small group. It could be a support group to the rest of the organization. You can practice servant leadership within your support group and make it work. You can set the example for other parts of the organization and talk about it. Be willing to share it with others. And it's amazing what you can do in your organization. We've all heard this before. None of us work for organizations. We work for people, for other people. And, our joy is about those people and how they relate to us and how we relate to them. And so you can change a huge organization if you start by doing it. You can't be afraid. I've always said, be willing to bet your job every day. You can find work. In order to do that, it's nice to have a few shekels or money in the bank, right? To have a little money in the bank so that you're able to, if you need to make a change because you're not in the right place, you can afford to do it. And that's why saving is so important, even a little bit. But you've got to be willing to bet your job every day on the things that you believe in. You can't live your life in an organization or in a marriage or whatever it happens to be out of fear. You have to live it according to your values and to what you believe represents you. And so, you can do servant leadership in your own little place. I've seen it happen over and over and over again in organizations that were autocratically led, where somebody in the organization started to lead their little organizations according to servant leadership model. And they were able to make systemic change. I mean, it's amazing. Not always, it's tough. And you got to, like I said, you got to be willing to bet your job. But it's doable.
Oh, I love that. So for those who are listening, I know because I've been writing so quickly. Luckily, this is recorded because I'm going to be wanting to go back to this. And in the show notes, you can check it out because a lot of these great things that Howard's talking about will be in there as well. But if you love the show, please make sure that you share it with those in your network. And also, don't forget to go to Apple Podcast or Spotify and give it a 5-star rating and a review because that's how people end up finding it in the algorithm. So I definitely appreciate you listening. And Howard, this has been amazing. I appreciate you even just accepting my invitation to be on the show.
You're kidding me. Anytime I get an opportunity to talk about servant leadership, you're going to find me there.
Oh, I love it. This has been great. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for joining the Leadership with Heart podcast. Thank you for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. You can grab the show notes by visiting customerfanatics.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter.